everyone, and welcome to On the Spectrum. My name is David Smith, and I'll be your host. Tonight, we're going to talk about special needs trust funds. Now, that may not sound like an exciting topic to discuss for 30 minutes, but if you have a family member or a loved one who faces intellectual challenges or physical disabilities and is on public assistance and has even just a little bit of extra money, you may find this show some help because our guest tonight knows all things trust fund. Please welcome attorney Jay Kearns.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, Jay, for coming on the show tonight. Now, you and I were talking earlier, and this is a very complex topic. I was really surprised at how many different avenues this takes. I mean, the questions were just endless, and so were the answers. So what I would like to do is start right at the beginning. What is a trust fund?
A trust fund is a fund that is established for the benefit of a beneficiary. And we have someone called the trustee who's charged with managing the trust for the benefit of the beneficiary. And this trust fund can either be established underneath a last will and testament, so that when an individual passes away, the trust then is created through the probate estate, or you could establish through a living trust a trust fund for someone's benefit during your lifetime.
Okay. Could it be considered just a safe place for extra money to be held? I mean, if we were to put it to its simplest terms.
Yes, but you've got to be very careful about the language that's used in the document to make sure that either the state of Connecticut or creditors cannot get their hands on these trust funds.
Okay. Then what is a special needs trust fund? How is that different from other trust funds?
Well, you might have trust funds that indicate that the money is not available until an individual reaches a certain age. Or it could be a discretionary trust, which means that the trustee has discretion over making distributions from that trust as the trustee sees fit for the beneficiary's needs. But essentially what a special needs trust is, like the name implies, is it's for someone's, quote, special needs. Special needs could be different things to different people, but if someone had a physical disability and they required a wheelchair or a computer assistance device, then it would be appropriate for the trustee to spend monies from the trust fund for those type of things, whether it be a special bed, a wheelchair van, a specially fitted wheelchair. For someone who has intellectual disabilities, it could be used for different therapies, aquatherapy, horse riding. It could be used for a personal aide or a personal attendant.
Okay. So obviously the public assistant won't pay for these things.
The public assistance through Medicaid pays for things to an extent.
Okay.
But typically the special needs trust, Dave, are used for the extras in life, which are not provided for by public benefits.
Okay. And are there different types of special needs trust funds?
Yes, there are. There are special needs trusts that could be established underneath someone's will, so that when a parent dies, a trust is established for a child through the will, where this way the parent has the use of the funds during their lifetime, and then when they die, the funds are set aside for the child's benefit. You could set up a living trust, which is a contract. You and I enter into a contract called a trust agreement. I give you funds. You agree to hold those funds for my son and use those for his benefit. And that's essentially how a living trust would work, is it's a contract that's established during somebody's lifetime. And the advantage there, Dave, which is different than the will, is during my lifetime, I could continue to contribute to that trust fund and then leave assets to that trust fund when I passed.
Okay. So who would qualify or benefit for one of these trust funds?
Anyone that cannot manage money should have a trust. So you might be looking at someone who's a spendthrift or someone who doesn't understand the concept of money. Two is, if certain people have assets in their names then they are disqualified for public benefits.
Okay.
So for instance, Medicaid has a rule where you're not allowed to own $1,600 for certain Medicaid public benefit programs. SSI, which stands for Supplemental Security Income, does not allow for you to have more than $2,000 of liquid assets.
Okay.
Otherwise, you're disqualified from your monthly Social Security check.
Okay. Now, once the trust is set up, obviously there would be a trustee. I think everybody knows that. Who would that be? What are the choices for the trustee of the fund?
The choice for most clients is they would like a family member involved in overseeing the management of money for another family member. But sometimes that's not practical. And then they're looking at perhaps a corporate fiduciary. And a corporate fiduciary would be a bank and trust company, or it could be a brokerage firm that does have a trust division within it, like the Merrill Lynch Trust Company, or Wells Fargo has a trust department. There's several different types of trust companies that are out there that would be interested in managing funds for people with disabilities or just managing funds for people who can't manage money.
Okay.
So you could have a corporate trustee, you could have a professional trustee, which could be an attorney or an accountant. So the three categories would be a relative, a corporate fiduciary, or a professional.
Okay. Now, we've gone through these questions, and you also supplied an article, which I found fascinating, because basically what the article does is it tells a story of what a family would go through to set one of these up, the pitfalls, the benefits, and how to do and what not to do. And as far as the trustee goes, it mentions that it uses a fictional character, Bill, who is disabled and receives public benefits, but he also has a trust fund, special needs trust fund, and it's time for the family to choose the trustee. He has a sister, but the sister might not be trustworthy, or she might not be good with money, which does happen.
Right.
What would the suggestion be? And what are the options at that point? Because I think a lot of people think, well, we're going to keep it in the family. I mean, you know, she's his sister. She's very good with him. She knows all about his disabilities. We know she'll always be there for him. So we're going to make her the trustee. But she's not very good with money. She's displayed that in her own life. What would your suggestions be, and what would the options for the living parents be, thinking forward?
In that type of scenario, I would advise the parents to look beyond the daughter who is unable to manage money, because if she has a poor track record managing her own funds, you're inviting a disaster in managing here Bill's funds, the hypothetical beneficiary.
Okay.
And my advice to the family would be, I would look at other family members who might be nieces or nephews or cousins who are still relatives. They might be familiar with the beneficiary. They might be familiar with the beneficiary's disabilities, but they might have a background either as an attorney, an accountant, in finance or tax, where they have special tools which would help them with their careers as a suitable trustee for someone with disabilities.
All right, and you mentioned that a professional trustee is an option, so obviously it does not have to be a relative.
Correct, that is an option.
Could it be anybody?
It could be anybody, but you just want to make certain that this person does a good job.
Right, because there are dangers.
There are dangers, there's conflicts of interest with family members not wanting to spend the money, thinking that when the person with disabilities dies, they're going to receive the trust fund themselves.
Okay. Thinking of the trustees, it's a very important job.
It certainly is.
And the person has to be very well educated, because from what I was reading, you could severely affect the beneficiary's life.
Well, Dave, one of the things that I always tell my clients is you want to surround yourself with the smart people. And the smart people would be a good accountant who understands trust accounting, a good money manager who's going to invest the money properly, not in speculative stuff, but on quality blue chip stocks, mutual funds, or bonds, because you want to make the money last for this disabled individual's lifetime.
Okay, so it's not that so different from a retirement fund.
Not at all.
It's just managed by somebody else.
Right.
Responsibly.
And what the trustee really has to learn is a couple of things. My first rule is learn to say no, because sometimes dealing with people with disabilities myself, I find that they're always asking for a distribution from the trust. And if you gave them a distribution for every time that they asked, you'd soon run out of money. And again,
Right.
the purpose of the trust is to make certain that you make the money last for the individual's lifetime. The second thing is you have to know some taxes. And working with a CPA, the CPA is going to give you some pointers in terms of what happens when you purchase or sell things inside the trust in terms of triggering tax liabilities, and also what kind of deductions you might get for perhaps paying for therapies or medical treatment from the trust. And then number three is, aside from learning to say no, learning the tax liability on transactions in the trust would be, if we're making distributions from the trust, we certainly don't want to disqualify the beneficiary from assistance. So for example, we know that there's a $2,000 limit on assets that one can own, and if they have more than $2,000 of assets, they're disqualified from SSI. We certainly wouldn't want the trustee to say to the beneficiary, here's a check for $3,000, go put it in your bank account,
Right.
where now that's going to disqualify the beneficiary from SSI until such time as they get their assets back below $2,000.
Okay, let's say that happens. How much of a disaster is that?
In 39 states out of the 50 states in the country, that is a disaster.
Okay.
And the reason why is in 39 states, Connecticut is not one of the 39. If you're eligible for SSI, you automatically are eligible for Medicaid. If you're disqualified for SSI, you've just disqualified yourself for Medicaid. And so in 39 other states, that would be a disaster. In Connecticut, the SSI eligibility with Social Security is different than the eligibility for Medicaid with the Department of Social Services.
Okay. So the goal would be to enrich the beneficiary's life, but only to a certain point. Now, what can a trust fund pay for? I did see that a home, the money could be used towards a home.
Sure.
And a good home, because you mentioned that if the person was disabled, an elevator. So as long as it's justified, where is that balance of?
The balance really is, if we went out and purchased a home, and everybody wants a home, everybody wants a car. If we purchase a house, can we afford the maintenance on it?
Okay.
And now you're looking at, are we developing a budget to address the real estate taxes, the insurance, the utilities, having somebody rake the leaves, mow the lawn, and shovel the snow. And I had a situation like that recently where someone told me that they want the trust to purchase a home for them. And once I asked them if they're able to shovel the snow and cut the grass and rake the leaves, the response is, no, that's not my cup of tea, that's not what I do. And I explained to them that, well, then we have to hire and pay somebody to do that, which means now we have those expenses draining the trust fund. So every case is different, just like every trust is different. You really have to look at the assets in the trust, the income that it generates, and determine whether or not you can afford to spend the money on certain things.
Okay. Step one, find a lawyer. You're going to need a lawyer.
Right.
Okay.
And you're going to need one that's not just a lawyer, but someone who's skilled in this particular area, who has experience in this particular area. And that typically is not the attorney who did the real estate closing for you, or might have brought a personal injury action on your behalf, or someone who does bankruptcy or collections or divorce.
Or a family friend.
A family friend. Those are the worst kind of attorneys to have, because frequently what they're trying to do is help you out, and the help that they're providing might not be good help. So you're really looking for not only an attorney who specializes in trusts and estates, but someone who's also knowledgeable about public benefits, because that's the special needs side. Really this whole area of the law is the intersection of knowing about trusts, how to draft trusts and the language of trust, and also knowing public benefits law in terms of what type of provisions could create problems where it could serve to disqualify the beneficiary because they have the right to compel a distribution, they have the right to revoke a trust, or the trustee has the ability to be overruled by a court.
Okay. Where would you find a lawyer then? I see the Special Needs Alliance. What is the Special Needs Alliance? The
Special Needs Alliance is a group of attorneys around the country that specialize in this area of the law. It's by invitation only. The website is www.specialneedsalliance.org. It's a not-for-profit group of law firms from around the country of individual lawyers who specialize in this particular area of law.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What else can they find on the website besides
There's
lawyers?
a newsletter called The Voice, and The Voice is a monthly newsletter. There's newsletters from past years, past months, where if you're researching a particular topic and you have an interest in, let's say, Social Security benefits, you can review all the newsletters that deal with that particular topic. If you're interested in guardianships or conservatorships, you could take a look at that topic. If you're interested in what the impact is of the HIPAA law insofar as it affects your child that just turned age 18, where you're not going to get any of their medical protected information, there's articles that address that as well. So there's a wealth of information, the articles on that particular website.
Okay. You have the trust fund set up. You've got a trusted trustee, you've got the beneficiary, and the train is rolling. Where does it go from there? Now, we discussed that there are investments, there is income. The trust fund generates income through investments.
Right.
And one of the complicated parts that we talked about was that the trust fund doesn't belong to the beneficiary. Is that correct?
Legally, the trust funds do not belong to the beneficiary. The owner of the trust funds legally is the trustee. However, the beneficiary has an equitable interest because if you think about it, who's the trust fund for? It's for the beneficiary.
Okay.
But let's go back to your scenario about the train is rolling, we have the trust set up, there's money in the trust, what do? First things first is let's take a look at what are the needs of the beneficiary before we even start investing the money, because we don't know if we're looking at long-term investments or short-term investments, what kind of investments. We have to sit down and see what are the special needs of the beneficiary first and foremost. And we develop a budget. Okay. And the budget is what are the needs, whether it be needs that are not being addressed by Medicaid, Social Security, it could be a rental, it could be the house, it could be a wheelchair van, it could be a number of things, but what we want to do is really profile the beneficiary. Because Dave, all too often if you get a corporate trustee in there or someone else, they're looking at dollars and cents instead of looking at the individual human being. And from my perspective, that's the first course of action is profile the beneficiary. What are their needs? What can we do to enhance their life?
Okay. What is a letter of intent?
A letter of intent is a document. It's not a legal document, but it's almost like directives that are left behind by the parents, where the parents are attempting to describe their child in a portrait. And the portrait is not a painting, but this document describes the nuances, the idiosyncrasies of this human being who's the beneficiary. Okay. What's their favorite vacation? What's their favorite food? Who are their circle of friends? What kind of medications are they on? Who are the doctors? Who's the dentist? Any difficulties that the beneficiary has faced in the past, medically, socially, emotionally, all that stuff should be in this type of letter of intent, because this way the trustee has a reference point. So instead of having the trustee focused on the dollars and cents and the dividends and the interest and making the payments for the beneficiary's care, they're able to get a better sense of who this individual is that is the beneficiary. And one of the things that I always am telling clients is, when it comes to a special needs trust, you're trying to tailor the document to the individual. And a perfect example of that is through the letter of intent, where you're trying to really dig down and understand who is this person that we're supposed to be taking care of.
Okay. Back to the trust fund itself and the trustee. I was asking if the beneficiary owned it. The answer was no.
Yep.
Now, somebody's question might be, is a trust fund a tax liability for a trustee?
And the answer is no. The trustee is called fiduciary, and fiducia in Latin means trust. So the trustee is a person who stands in a position of trust. Although the trustee is the legal owner and they're responsible for the trust funds, they personally do not own the trust funds. So the trustee is required to file a tax return, much like a president of a company files a tax return on behalf of the company.
Okay.
Okay, that's the perfect analogy for you.
All right. So the trust fund has annual tax liabilities.
It has its own EIN,
responsibility.
employer identification number, much like a
Really?
company does.
Really?
Yes.
Okay. Because money is money, after all, and income is income.
Yep.
All right. So the train is rolling. We have our letter of intent.
Yep.
The trustee understands the needs and the wants of the beneficiary, and everything is going along fine. This could go for years,
That's what the purpose is.
and that's the goal.
A lifetime, right?
Right. So what you want to do is enrich the beneficiary's life. They have Social Security. They have to pay for their food and shelter.
Yep.
They have Medicare.
They could have Medicare. It all depends upon if they receive Social Security Disability Insurance, SSDI. Then after a 2-year wait, they do receive Medicare. If they are on SSI, then they are on Medicaid. They are not receiving Medicare.
Okay. So the trustee would have to keep up on all these laws.
Yes.
And we were talking about the Social Security. It actually moves forward chronologically, and there are 3 types.
Correct.
And can you go through those real quick?
When someone reaches the age of 18 and they are a major or an adult, not a minor anymore, if they suffer from a disability and they're not able to work, then they are eligible for SSI, which is called the Supplemental Security Income Program. Now, the reason why you're looking at them at age 18 is because if you applied for SSI before the person reaches age 18, then you're deeming the assets of the family in the household to that individual, which typically disqualifies them.
Okay.
Because the family members have more than $2,000 typically. So when they reach age 18 and they're independent from their parents, they stand on their own 2 feet in terms of their eligibility for SSI. And if they're eligible for SSI, then they would receive a monthly check. But a little nuance here is that if they live in the parents' home and there's food and shelter provided by the parents, there could be a reduction in the SSI benefit because the SSI is intended for shelter and food.
Okay.
So with that reduction, one way around it is for the parents to perhaps enter into a room and board or a reimbursement agreement whereby the child agrees to reimburse the folks for the food and the rent in order to make sure that they get the full value of the Social Security check.
Okay. So you have this lump of money in a trust fund,
Yep.
and the train has been rolling for years, decades, and the beneficiary passes. What happens to the money in the trust fund?
It's like Simon says, the money in the trust goes wherever the trust document says it goes.
Okay.
And so what the drafter of the trust should have put in there is that the money in the trust is available for the beneficiary, Johnny, and if Johnny dies, then the trust funds go to Susie or Billy or another family member perhaps, or even to charities. I've had clients who, in the past have had charities, grassroots charities that cater to people with intellectual disabilities or autism, and the family is very impressed with the quality of the services provided by that not-for-profit, and they want to help out the mission of the not-for-profit, and therefore the trust fund or part of it could go to that particular charity.
Okay. Does the beneficiary in death ever have to pay back the benefits that he or she gets from the state?
Well, this is a question where we're going to confuse the viewers, because now we're going to talk about a different type of special needs trust. And this is what I like to call the payback trust. And what the payback trust means is that someone's been on a disability for a period of time, they receive a windfall, and the windfall jeopardizes and makes them ineligible for benefits. And the solution to that type of problem is to take the windfall, place it into an irrevocable trust, which says upon the death of the beneficiary, the trust pays back the state for the public benefits received.
Okay.
And so what would happen is, at a future date when the beneficiary died, if they had been on Medicaid and they had such a payback trust, that the funds would in fact be paid back to the state of Connecticut towards that individual's bill.
Okay. Can you give me the Special Needs Alliance website again?
Yes, the Special Needs Alliance website is www.specialneedsalliance.org, and it's got a wealth of information about how to find an attorney, articles, and also resources that are available to people.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you, Dave.
It was a wealth of information. I'm sure it's going to help a lot of people. Thanks for joining us tonight. Again, my name is David Smith. Hope you enjoyed tonight's show, and we'll see you next time on The Spectrum.
This morning on an early grave, I'm ready to say goodbye. Nothing left to say. Time took the time, trying not to spend. All I wanted is, I made all of this. I wanted it. All of this. I'm hurting. All of this. I've been